And welcome, my friends, to another episode here at the Red Delta Project podcast and live feed Q&A here on the RDP YouTube channel, where we take a fundamental approach to diet and exercise, giving you more power, control, and freedom over your healthy lifestyle. I'm Matt Shifley from the Red Delta Project. Today's episode is sponsored by the litany of products and services available through the Red Delta Project that I always recommend and refer to here on these episodes, like the RDP library, my books here, Grind Style Calisthenics, micro workouts. We're going to be diving a lot of the content in these books all about boosting motivation, or more importantly, avoiding some of the common things that I find people apply day in and day out that actually hurt motivation, because it is crucially important. As I'm writing my next book, which is all about the fundamentals of fitness, which is the processes that are truly responsible for your results, I have an entire chapter on motivation. Why? Simple. It's because as human beings, it is crucial for your success. It's kind of a bit of a counter message to a lot of the stuff out there on the internet and in social media saying motivation, it comes and goes. It's not that important, shut up and just do it kind of attitudes and stuff. And the more I'm learning about the process and the role motivation plays in our lives, the more I can't escape from the fact that it is so important. In fact, I would say that you could know everything there is to know about diet and exercise. You could have all the wealth of knowledge, the best gyms, the best of everything as far as fitness goes, and still have the same level of health and fitness as someone who's completely ignorant of anything to do with fitness. In fact, I would even go so far as to say, give me someone with motivation over someone with the best knowledge and circumstances when it comes to trying to get in shape, because a motivated person is still going to take action versus someone who knows everything, but they're not motivated. Doesn't do them any good. It's that old saying, I think it was Mark Twain who said something to the effect of, someone who doesn't read has no advantage over the person who can't read. It's the exact same thing. Someone who lacks motivation has no advantage over someone who has motivation has no advantage over somebody who lacks motivation but knows everything. We have to have it. It is crucial to your success for the simple reason that motivated people are taking action. If you don't have motivation, you're not taking action. It's that simple. That's always the thing we need to look for. It's like, well, if I'm not motivated, but I'm taking action, you're motivated. And this is one of the things that I come across many times. There's something, I'm sure there's a psychological name for this sort of phenomenon. Why is it that a lot of the people who claim that something isn't important in life are also the people who just always have or have usually had that thing? Like the individuals who are like, money is not important. Money can't buy happiness. Money's not that crucial for your quality of life. I'm like, that's because you grew up in a upper middle class family and you've always had money. You've never had to worry about putting food on the table. You've never had to worry about paying the bills. So when we are subconsciously unaware of the importance of something, if it's in our life to a large degree, we don't really recognize its importance. Same thing with people. I've got several friends who are just beautiful, they're gorgeous, and they're like, there's not, dating is easy and going out to places and meeting people is easy. It's like, that's because you're hot as hell. That's because you've always had that social confidence, because you've always had that ability to be more of an extrovert. But you take kind of a introverted individual like myself, that is very important. So there's this thing about human nature that's so curious about, if we've always had something, we can't understand what it's like to lack that thing. And that's certainly the case with motivation, because I guarantee you the bulk of the people out there telling you motivation is not important have long had motivation. And because it's subconscious, they're not aware of its vast importance. But you talk to individuals who don't have the motivation and you'll get a very different story. And that's certainly been my case. I was always one of those individuals who was like, motivation's not that important, because I've always wanted to be in shape. I've always liked to exercise. I've always been very driven. But of course, when you start learning about the importance of what's truly essential in fitness, that's what a fundamental approach is about, I can't get around the fact that, yes, motivation is very important. And frankly, I've just been extremely lucky that I've always had it, that I've always been able to get up and be like, I'm going to the gym today. one of the big myths about motivation is I think that people believe it's an all or nothing thing, that you're either 100% motivated and all in on your desire to do something, or you don't want to do it at all. And so that's not the case. There's always a part of you that doesn't quite want to do something. And I think a lot of times when people run into a bit of emotional friction, and they're like, yeah, I go to the gym, yeah, sure, but there's a part of me that doesn't want to. There's a part of me that would rather sit at home and go to happy hour or play video games. Something must be wrong with me. No, not at all. There's always going to be that. Back when I was a bike racer, I'd be on that start line, pouring rain, 45 degrees. I'm tired. There's a big part of me that did not want to be there. But there was a bigger part of me that did, and that's why I was doing that race. So when we have this desire not to do it, we think something's wrong. It's like, no, that's perfectly fine. That's human nature. The key with motivation is to get enough desire to do it that you still take consistent action, even if there's a part of you that doesn't quite want to, and if possible, minimizing that part as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, your success certainly does depend on your emotional drive. Because even if you do have the motivation to get your workout in, your motivation is going to allow you to keep pushing yourself forward. If you're doing your push-ups, if you have less motivation, you're going to get to a point where you're like, that's good enough. Okay, I'm done. Versus someone who's more motivated, and you'll find someone who's like burning like crazy in the muscles, and they're really struggling, they're breathing hard, and they're like, great, keep going, keep going. So even if you're taking consistent action, motivation will propel you to a higher level of performance in getting you what you want. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. Let's explore some of these things that are crucially important and you want to avoid when it comes down to improving your motivation, or at least avoiding a downplay in motivation. Now, there are 4 of these in each category because ultimately motivation boils down to a cost to benefit ratio. When you have an activity you're doing, let's say going to the gym, and there's a high perceived benefit, keep in mind it's a perceived benefit, doesn't necessarily need to be logical. Motivation's all about how we feel. A perceived benefit that's high and a perceived cost that's low, you'll be motivated. But if that scale starts to tilt a little bit and the perceived costs are very high and the perceived benefits are very low, you're going to lose motivation to the point where you will no longer take action. So motivation is not necessarily this kind of woo-woo thing that how do we do it? It's kind of this weird thing. I think a lot of people who are critical of motivation just don't understand how it works. But when we recognize that it is simply that process of cost to benefit, and we're always evaluating this thing on a subconscious level, then we can, like many things in life, once we bring it to a conscious level and we're paying attention to it, then we can actually work on it and improve it. And it's really not that hard or difficult. Case in point here, let's get to some questions. Folks coming on in, Wolfie Dragon saying, this should be good. I always find I'm less motivated when I'm stressed, which really I should train because it helps. That is very, very good point there, Wolfie, because when we are stressed, in fitness, people talk about the stress cup or the stress bucket, and stress from all sources goes into that area. So if you were stressed on at work, for example, and you're like, oh, my boss was yelling at me all day and I'm stressed about the Wolford account or whatever, that is stress that is still going to increase the perceived cost of going to the gym. Meanwhile, if you went and you had a great day at work, I'm like, dude, I got promoted, I got a raise, I got all this great things happening, and I gave a great presentation, and everything's great. Your stress level's lower, your perceived cost of going to the gym is much lower. Of course, you're going to be more motivated. Like, I feel amazing. I'm going to crush it in the gym today. So it's about lowering the perceived cost in many cases. Esteban saying, hey, Matt, I've learned that the best way for me to deal with motivation is just to work out every single day at the same time. So that's such an ingrained habit. It'd be weird for me not to do it. A very, very good point, Esteban. Thank you very much for mentioning that. Because in our fitness culture, we have one of the things that can be very detrimental. Number one, let's get right into it, that increases your perceived cost is the quote, just do it mentality. You hear that all the time. Doesn't matter how you feel, go to the gym. Doesn't matter how you feel. You just got to get it in. Doesn't matter how you feel about your diet. You got to just stick to it. This is admittedly coming from a place of understanding, because when we are looking at our behaviors, we have both discipline and we have obedience. A lot of people will say that. I'm not motivated, I'm disciplined. No, I think you're confusing discipline with obedience because they're very different. See, a disciplined individual will do what they should be doing based on decision making. They collect information, they collect data, they're analyzing their circumstances, and they're making very careful decisions about what they should do. That's discipline. It's staying on the path, even if the path is changing around. Now, obedience, on the other hand, is going with the flow. It's going along with whatever the rule is or whatever the individual or the coach is saying. You jump, you just go along and jump as high as you can. Now, obedience might seem like a bad thing. It's like, oh, mindless worker drone can't think for themselves kind of thing. But in reality, obedience and discipline are both crucially important, because while discipline does give you a lot of control, it's also extremely costly because making decisions takes a lot of energy and time and effort. Pardon me. So that's why sometimes in like the Silicon Valley culture, you hear of decision fatigue, and the whole idea of Steve Jobs always wearing the same turtleneck and stuff. So he didn't have to decide what he was wearing every day. He just had the rule, jeans and black turtleneck. So it's one less decision he needs to make. So obedience means that we're going along with our habits. And while that may seem like just a mindless worker drone mentality, it's good because it's very, very efficient. You just kind of do the same thing, which is what you're talking about here. It's just, oh, it's, alarm goes off, time for my workout, and you just kind of go along with it. There's that book, The Power of Habit, about how basically we establish habits and we basically obey our habits. We're not really thinking about them too much. And that's extremely efficient. The problem is, what kind of habits are you laying down? Because habit can either help or it can hurt, depending on what direction your habits are taking you. So always remember that it takes discipline to establish your habits, but once the habits are established, then you just simply obey them. And every once in a while, you want to assess them and be like, is it really the best thing for me to be doing this thing this way, to be working out first thing in the morning, maybe later on and stuff? And then it's going to take discipline and careful assessment and decision-making to change the habits. But discipline and obedience are both important. But I think a lot of times, again, people confuse obedience with discipline when they're like, oh, you just go and do it. It's just an autopilot. That's not discipline, my friends. That is obedience. You're just going along with the flow. And again, this is a thing that when we're subconsciously doing it, we don't have a good ability to relate to people who don't have it. Because, some guy on YouTube who's like, you just got to be, disciplined. You just got to go do it. It's like, you've been working out for 30 years, man. You've been working out for 20 years. You went and were in the military. You're a Navy SEAL. Like, this stuff is so ingrained in your DNA that it would take a ton of work for you not to work out. Someone who's studied nutrition and has been eating well for the past 20 years would have to put in effort to go eat fast food every day. It's an ingrained habit. They're just obeying it. It's not discipline. They've just got it on autopilot, which is a good thing. However, they forget oftentimes, and I forget this too, that when folks are making a change in their diet and exercise habits, they don't have that background. They don't have those habits established. So they're still in the stages of assessment of, is this worthwhile for me to go to the gym? Or is it worthwhile for me to skip happy hour? And when their motivation is starting to go low, that's literally their subconscious saying, I don't know if this is quite worth it. So you're not on the same playing field, my friends. You're not the same type of person. The person who says motivation is not important is in a very different lifestyle and circumstances. Again, it's like the millionaire saying money is not important to his friend who's struggling to pay the electric bill. It's like, you're not even in the same time zone here. You can't relate. So you're giving bad advice. Maybe that would be fine if you were telling it to another millionaire going, you know what really makes me happy? The things money can't buy. That's fine. But to the individual who is struggling to stay on track with their workout and diet, who's struggling with motivation, if you're already well established with your habits, you're not qualified to give them good advice unless you can relate to their circumstances. And that's something that all of us coaches have to learn the hard way sooner or later. I'm still learning it myself. And it's not a very pretty picture because we all think the world is built around our own perspectives. This is why sometimes I will clearly tell someone, I'm not a very good coach to give you advice on this topic. Like when people are struggling with their diet and they can't lose weight because they're heavy drinkers and they're drinking like 3 or 4 drinks every night or something like that. I'm not a very good coach to help people with that because I'm not much of a drinker myself. I can go weeks without an alcoholic drink. I won't even miss it. So I can't relate to your circumstances because I've never been there before. So therefore, I could be like, just don't drink as much. Just don't have alcohol in the house and stuff. That's only coming from my own perspective, but it's so different from the heavy drinker's perspective that it's not qualified advice. I can't give that type of advice very well. It could be well intended, but I fully admit I'm very unqualified for that because I can't relate to that. But the more I'm learning about motivation, the more I am a little more qualified about that and why I do these sorts of things. So that whole idea of just do it, the first way that we're increasing the cost is understandable, but it's not true. Because if you're doing habits that are not worthwhile, your subconscious is telling you it's not worth it to stay on the diet or the workout program, forcing yourself to stick to it is a bad idea because your subconscious is literally telling you this isn't working out. It's like staying in a bad relationship. This isn't working out, but let's still enforce it, in other words. When we are losing motivation, that is an invitation to reassess our cost to benefit ratio and say, okay, let's look at this and look at where we can get our cost down or reestablish what we want out of this sort of thing. But the whole just do it mentality, you can probably force it for a short period of time, but it's only going to get worse. So that's the first thing that's driving up the cost. The second thing that drives up the cost is the collective thing that I like to call the hustle culture. Maybe this term isn't so much in vogue these days, but it's this idea of you just got to work your ass for it. You work, whatever you're doing, put in more hours, more time, more energy, more effort, work. Hard work always pays off. This is nothing more than a mindset to drive up the cost of your habits. And yeah, sometimes working harder can be a good way to go about it, especially maybe in the short term, but it's a very bad long-term approach because all you're doing is blasting up your cost. You're spending more time and more energy and sometimes more money and more effort towards your objectives, crossing your fingers and hoping it's going to pay off. It's like if you were a day trader and you're losing your shirt in the market every day, and you said, instead of investing $1,000 a week, I'm going to invest $2,000 a week. I'm losing even more money, $3,000 a week, even more money, $4,000. At some point, you're going to step back and be like, this is not working. This is a bad idea to keep investing in bad investments. Because that's literally all hard work is just investment of yourself, investment of your time and your energy, your money and so forth towards your fitness goals. So when your motivation is starting to chronically dwindle down, that's literally your subconscious saying the investments are not paying off. Stop investing in this thing. We've got to take a different tact. So when we're lost in the hustle culture of just work, that's the same thing as keep investing, and don't do any of your homework. Don't look at the projective profits of various companies. Don't look at what their future plans are. It's like, oh, the stock on this thing is tanking on this company that's probably going to go bankrupt. Well, keep investing anyway. Who cares? That's the hustle culture, my friends. And yes, hard work is very important, but don't work blindly. Please. I've done it for years myself. It doesn't pay off. And if it does pay off, it pays off by just blind luck, which means it pays off some of the time, and it's usually not enough to really be worthwhile. Elle is echoing what I was saying earlier. My personal experience is need motivation to start a new habit, and after some time, autopilot starts to work. Exactly, yes. Because that's the beautiful thing about habit. If we had to consciously make disciplined choices over everything in life, we'd never get anything done. You know, you'd be talking with your friend and you're like, okay, hang on. What? Oh, I need a moment. What are you doing? I have to, okay. I have to tie my shoes. Oh boy. Okay. Hold on. Everybody stop. I got to concentrate. Of course not. You just get down, you tie it while you're speaking with your friend. You do it on autopilot. Habit is a beautiful thing for efficiency, But always remember, it's only about efficiency, not necessarily benefit. So that's why we've got to make sure our habits are going in the right direction. And it takes a little bit of time and effort to reassess things on a regular basis, which is a worthwhile thing to do. All right, number 3, habits that are killing your motivation. These first 4 are all about boosting up the cost of your habits. And as a result, you'd better have better results to follow it, or else it's going to dwindle your motivation. And this third one is volume seeking. This is particularly with exercise. It's kind of a hustle culture thing, but it's a little bit more specific to exercise, where it's just more sets, more reps, running more miles. Oh, I worked out twice a week. Now I'm going to do it 3 times a week, then 4 times a week, then twice a day. And then, each one more sets, more exercise, more. Always remember that you cannot scale hard work, my friends. Yes, there's going to be some degree of benefit initially from doing more work, but at some point, the cost of every little bit more invested is going to return less, have less to return, but the perceived cost is going to increase. When I was getting really heavy into Taekwondo, I was only going once a week. And then I said, I'm going to go twice a week. And that was a huge benefit because I doubled my training frequency and it was just one more class. It wasn't really that hard. Great, 3 times a week. All right, 50% more, but boy, that was okay, 3 times, I could do that. I could do that. 4 times, 5 times, 6 times a week. The difference in my improvements from that 5th to 6th class, honestly, I don't even know if there was any benefit at all. But I was getting sore joints. I was achy. It was really hard for me to fit into my schedule. That 6th class came at a very high cost, but it really wasn't producing any return. So this is the thing with volume is, yes, you can get better from adding volume, but only to a degree. And you want to recognize that. Pardon me, very dry today. So when you recognize that only so much is going to help you, you can keep a lookout for it. And you can say, okay, I've added a couple more exercises, but is it really helping? I've added another workout this week, but is it really helping? You don't want to just assume it is, because when we're chasing after volume, then you just end up assuming it's going to work out, and you're not really assessing logically if it's going to be worthwhile. But always remember that your subconscious is always doing the accounting software. It's always keeping the books and assessing your cost to benefit ratio, even if you're not consciously aware of it. So if you're not consciously aware of it, then you're just going to keep adding on, and your subconscious is saying, dude, it's not worth it. And your motivation is going to start to tank. A couple more questions here. Trizzy BTW off talk, but I was thinking you would give me, advice. Yeah, ask a question, my friend. Anything you need. Ravi. Hey, Matt, with pull-ups, I've really been focused on activating my back muscles. Good. As a result, as I'm pulling up in front of the bar rather than under it, is this okay form-wise? Absolutely. I mean, you have to have the bar, to the front of you to some degree. If you can, one of the best ways to go about it is to do it with individual handles or rings, so you can feel like you're really pulling between your hands. But the real secret to that, it's not where you are relative to your hands, it's where your shoulders are relative to your center line of your frontal plane. So you've got your center line that your frontal plane divides front to back. So get your shoulders back. What you're probably experiencing as the benefit is just you're getting more shoulder retraction because of where your orientation is to your hands and your bar. So I would say focus more on that shoulder retraction and let your shoulders elevate and depress. With pull-ups, it's a good thing to do, but focus on maintaining that retraction. You're probably going to find that's a much more reliable and more stable way to go about it as far as your back activation goes. Esteban's coming on again. Extremely driven and exceptional people like David Goggins can help your motivation in the sense of inspiring you, firing you up to push yourself more. Absolutely. Be around people who inspire, but beware of those who are just kind of like, be like me, because ultimately you're the one who has to pull the trigger. No one ever got in shape watching YouTube videos. I know, irony of irony here on the YouTube channel. But the fact of the matter is, you can watch all the motivational stuff in the world on YouTube. But if you wake up the next day and keep doing the same habits, it didn't do you any good whatsoever. In fact, you were probably better off just watching Netflix, because you took all that time and you spent all that energy to watch the motivational stuff. But always remember that the real litmus test is it changing your actions? And this goes for everything in fitness too: education, data collection. We've got Fitbits and we've got the smartwatches and everything like that. But always remember, this stuff is only worthwhile if you change your habits, if you're taking action. If you watch something on YouTube, like one of my videos or whatnot, you should come away saying, this is what I'm going to change about how I'm doing something. Like, hopefully my man over there is like, oh, okay, I'm going to start doing my pull-ups with my shoulders, really focusing on that. If you do not have a clear action form, then whatever you're watching is a waste of time. It's just entertainment. Mr. Goggins can be like, you've got to man up and just force yourself to do it. And you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm fired up. Gee, what's on TV tonight? It didn't do anything. It was a waste of your time. It might make you feel a little bit different in the moment, but if you're not actually doing something better and upgrading, it doesn't do you any good, because that's what motivation really is all about, is getting your actions to change, your behaviors to change. You can learn all the stuff in the world, but knowledge is only power when applied. If you know how to improve your pull-up, but the pull-up bar is still collecting dust and you've got, your laundry hanging off of it, didn't do you any good then, did it? It's not of any real benefit. So always remember that we need practical application with this stuff. It doesn't do me any good to say, tough luck, Buttercup, just get your ass in the gym. Yeah, that sounds good on a social media post, but honestly, I honestly believe that advice is largely just worthless. It doesn't do anything if it doesn't get you to move. And then finally, a big cost that I find people run into is fatigue chasing. I do this sometimes with folks in the gym. What's your objective here today? What are you trying to accomplish in your workout? And so often the plan that they have is, I'm just going to kick my own ass. I'm going to drive myself. I'm going to run until my legs turn to rubber. I'm going to be doing push-ups until I'm peeling myself off the floor. I'm going to lift until my muscles just give out on me and I can barely move the next day. I know it's satisfying stuff, but that's not a plan, because fatigue is not what changes the body. If that was, then anybody who worked out would be getting in great shape. But it's not the way to go about it, because again, it's a hustle culture thing. I'm just going to spend as much as I possibly can and hope it ends up well in the end. That's not a good plan for your motivation, because you're just driving up the cost as high as you possibly can, crossing your fingers and hoping to get successful through luck, through dumb luck. And I don't want to play that game. I'm investing here. I'm investing my precious time and energy. I don't want to be successful on luck. I don't want to put my life savings into, some sort of a financial investment, cross my fingers and hope I don't lose it. No, that would be very foolish of me. It's the same thing with just chasing after fatigue. Sure, if I drive myself into the ground, then it's got to work for me to some degree. Yeah, maybe initially, but now all you've done is basically invested everything you've got, and it better pay off. Because remember, we're not talking about having a payoff to be worthwhile. It needs to be enough of a payoff to be worthwhile. You can invest $1,000, but it only works out if you make more than $1,000 back. It's like, I invested $1,000. Well, what's it at now? It's $500. Great, you have $500. Yeah, but I lost $500. It's the same thing. We need a net gain as far as the cost of benefits here. So when we're talking about the beat yourself up kind of mentality, that's essentially just investing as much as you've got and hoping it's going to be worthwhile. I don't know about you, my friend, but I don't think that's a winning strategy. That's not a risk I want to take. I don't want to risk things when it comes to my health and fitness. I want it to be a very worthwhile payoff as much as possible. I want to invest as much as I need to, but I want the payoff to be massive. And that's what's going to be great for motivation. And I don't think anybody would argue with me on that one. Karzik Falina, can you try your nervous system much easier than, can you tired your nervous system much easier than your muscles? To a degree. So this goes along with the stress thing I was talking about earlier. Remember, your nervous system's getting stressed all day, every day, no matter what we're doing. And there's a lot of folks out there, don't train this way, it fries out your nervous system and stuff. Remember though, that fitness does not happen in an isolated box. If you are in a very stressful environment, let's say, you're a trader on the New York Stock Exchange or something, your nervous system's getting fried every single day, even if you're completely sedentary. Your nervous system drives your muscles. That's why they call it the neuromuscular system. You can't ask your muscles to perform when your nervous system is suppressed. And that's why so much of what I do in my work is all about improving your nervous system. Because if your nervous system gets better, the muscles just get stronger practically on autopilot. It's always in that order. Your emotional system and state drives your nervous system. Your nervous system drives your physical system, your muscles. So if you feel like crap and your nervous system is shot to hell, your muscles haven't got a shot in hell. Your muscles are just going to basically struggle the entire time. So when it comes to your nervous system, be aware of stress outside of the workout. That's one of the bigger contributors to it. And when it comes to recovery, sleeping is your number one recovery asset. Sleeping and giving yourself the ability to recover as best as possible. And that is something to be wary of, absolutely. But you want to make sure that you are giving yourself plenty of recovery for the nervous system, because if your nervous system is shot, your muscles, they're not going to get trained. Not very effectively. And not all workouts are hard on the nervous system. Things that are generally less fatiguing aren't going to be quite as hard. That's Esteban saying again, I think there's to be a strong emotional impact when listening to someone's story, so that really gets you reflecting and creates a real emotional drive. You're right. When I was growing up as a kid, I was very much into Bruce Lee's stories and stuff. The movie with Jason Scott Lee, Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, came out, and I watched that, and it's like, whoa, oh my gosh, even though there was quite a bit of fiction in that movie and everything, but it was very inspiring. It's very, very motivating. So find those who resonate with you. Find examples that you can emulate, because I know there's that idea of comparison being kind of the thief of joy, but again, it goes with good or bad, because you could see someone who's bigger, faster, and stronger than you and feel bad about yourself, or you could see someone who's bigger, faster, and stronger than you and be like, wow, that's amazing. Oh, that's so cool. I'm going to work, on trying to get to there. That inspires me. Both happen with comparison. Again, it's our emotional reaction to it. It's how we feel about the circumstances that are the difference. You feel negative, bad. You feel positive, good. So be aware of your emotional reaction to these things. And if it is negative, we can work on that sort of thing. It's something that you can have some work with. But it takes quite a bit of something that you can work on over time through introspection, which can be hard. I know in fitness, we like the hard stuff of like, how many sets and reps should I do? How long should I rest and stuff? But there's a lot of progress in fitness that's subjective. And we need to embrace that stuff as well. Stay on track of saying, hey, Matt, so am I correct in saying that motivation becomes less important over time due to habit making? Is it unnecessary? No, it's always important. Because remember, discipline requires motivation, because it's decision making, it's energy, it's effort invested. People are like, I'm not motivated, I'm disciplined. You can't have discipline without motivation. It's impossible. Habits require less discipline. Obedience require less discipline, but you're never going to be at zero. You're always going to be facing circumstances that require a mix of the two. And ideally, yes, you shouldn't need as much motivation, because if we needed 100% discipline all the time, we'd have to have huge amounts of motivation all the time in order to be successful. And thank heavens that's not the case. Because motivation is like your energy level. Yes, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes, again, the message out there on social media is that motivation, it comes and goes. Sure, like energy, sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low, but it should not chronically be near zero. That's what I'm trying to tell people. Some days their motivation may be a little bit lower, maybe on the low side. Oh, I just don't feel like this right now. That's fine, that happens. But if you're chronically motivated, like I just never feel like I want to hit the gym, that's a very big problem. And you don't want to ignore that. You don't want to, screw it, just do it. Who cares how you feel, stuff. Bad advice all around. You want to have at least a decent level of motivation for the most part all the time. Just like your energy level should be up. If you're always going to the gym, dragging your feet, and you're like, I'm always tired and I'm always exhausted, Well, then I would sit you down and be like, all right, something's wrong here. Let's take a look at your sleep. Let's take a look at your lifestyle. Let's take a look at your diet. Let's take a look at all these other things, because you shouldn't be feeling like you need to take a nap all the time. That's not healthy. Just as a chronic loss of motivation and low motivation level, that's not a good thing. That means something is wrong and you need to address it. And some days it's a little bit different. Sure, it ebbs and flows, but it should not be something that is chronically lost. Again, that is a sign that something bad is going on and needs to be addressed. One more here before we jump into the other side of the equation. Mark is coming on. I have FAI, femoral. I'm not even going to pronounce it right now. I can never pronounce these sort of things. Anyway, I am swimming, strengthening Tai Chi to loosen my hips. Yes. Have you come across this condition before? No, I can't even pronounce it. Any thoughts or resources on how to improve it? Thank you very much. Yeah, conditions are always an in-person thing, my friends. If anything that the pandemic has taught me, it's that one-on-one in-person assessment and help and guidance is still and probably always will be the gold standard for anything health and fitness, and especially when things get more dire. And so when you've got a condition or something, seek out a professional in person if you can. And I know if you're not around someone like that, it might be a little bit hard, but definitely seek out professional advice in person. I know the internet has given us this idea of you can learn everything from YouTube, but there's still a lot of stuff out there that you cannot get off the internet. And that's almost any sort of condition or injury. Hey, Matt, I hurt see a doctor. I didn't even tell you what I did. I know, see a doctor. Don't come to me. Don't go to PubMed. It's like, yeah, whenever I do push-ups, it really hurts see someone about that. You gotta see somebody about it, because they're going to be able to assess and diagnose and get it fixed a hell of a lot faster than I would. I invested in an in-person chiropractor last year, fixed me right up. I had 10 years of trying to figure things out, watching videos, stretching this, mobilizing that, foam rolling this, massaging that. And in like 5 minutes, he's like, it's your neck, right? I'm like, what? No, the pain's like way down here. He's like, yeah, but it's because your neck is out of alignment. That's the power of in-person. They look at you and be like, this is what's wrong. Here's how to fix it. Or if they don't, then you just keep trying to figure it out. You put the pieces together. Trizzy is saying, hey, Matt, is it harder to build muscle at a younger age? It might be. This is one of the weird things about muscle is due to body types. I mean, everybody's kind of different. There's always that ratio. Well, motivation is one thing. Right? There's a lot of people when they're younger, they just don't have a lot of motivation. When I started doing Taekwondo, I wasn't really motivated to do it until I got older and more mature. So there's that. There's motivation changes throughout our life. There's also just the simple physiological things, especially when it comes to, quote, hard gainers, where we can kind of slow down a little bit, which nowadays a lot of the science is saying that our metabolism may not really slow down hardly at all until we're like well in our 60s or 70s. But I digress. Our life can certainly slow down as we get older as well. But I've certainly noticed that as I get a lot older, it's a lot easier to build and keep weight on. Just because I'm not going a mile a minute. I don't have the metabolism of a hummingbird like I did when I was much younger. But on the other hand, there are people who have, really high testosterone levels, and they're really fired up and full of piss and vinegar when they're a teenager and stuff. And yeah, you'll see them benching 400 pounds in the gym. And so it's different. The bottom line is, yes, the ability to build muscle definitely changes with age. And some people, they hit those sweet spots earlier in life. Some people, it's later in life. Generally, if you're, quote, the classic hard gainer, you're probably going to have a lot of an easier time building muscle later. But it's also kind of a correlation too. And I actually did a podcast on this last year. You might be able to find it still. Whereas like the muscle building benefits that come with getting older. There's a lot of people, once you're over 25, you can't build muscle. No, a lot of people build a lot more later on in life. Partially because of what I just said. Also, too, you just learn more. When I was in my 30s, I knew a hell of a lot more about proper programming and proper nutrition, rest, and my priorities in my life were a little different. I wasn't going out all the time. My life was a little bit more stable, working regular hours and stuff like that. So the bottom line is there are definitely different periods in our life where it's going to be easier to build muscle. Maybe it's earlier, maybe it's later, and it's going to be different for everybody. But for, yeah, certain people, there is big advantages to building muscle when you get older, which means, yeah, it's going to be harder when you're younger. All right, so we addressed cost. 4 things that are driving up the cost: hustle culture, just do it mindset, volume chasing, just more, and of course, fatigue chasing. Oh, I'm just here to drive myself into the ground. Those 4 things are going to drive up the cost, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But whenever you're increasing the cost of your habits, they have to produce a worthwhile return in order to keep your motivation up. And the higher that cost is, the higher that return has to be for it to be worthwhile. Like a movie director is like, I'm going to spend $500 million making this movie. Well, then you'd better have a blockbuster on your hands, because if you keep doing that, the studio is not going to greenlight your projects anymore. It has to be worthwhile in order to maintain motivation. And the higher the cost is, the less likely it's going to be worthwhile, or just the harder it is to be worthwhile. So let's make it more worthwhile. Let's talk about the things that are going to increase your benefit. So the first thing that we can do is have a very clear training objective with your workouts. Because a lot of times the hustle culture and the fatigue chasing and the volume chasing and just work comes from someone who doesn't know what they're doing. When we don't know what we're doing, our default modus operandi becomes just work harder and just hope it ends up working out in the end. But when we have a clear objective, then we know what we're trying to achieve, and we do however much work is necessary or we can do to achieve that objective. And that saves you a lot of time and energy, potentially. It's like if you're driving to the store that's half a mile away, you don't drive 30 miles because you don't have to. You reach your destination, you're like, great, that was quick, I'm done. The point of training is to achieve an objective, a stimulus. And if you don't know what that is, you're just going to endlessly drive around and try and work as hard as you can and hope by luck you're going to get there. And that's why my book, Micro Workouts, is all about understanding those 3 fundamental objectives. Because if you don't know what those are, you're training blind, regardless of what your program is and regardless of how hard you're working. It also leaves you much more susceptible to program hopping. Maybe it's this type of program, maybe higher volume, maybe 5x5, or what about 3x7? What about this? What about, you don't know. There's nothing that's ever going to tell you this is working unless the results are really, really going to be self-evident, in which case they're not, because chances are one workout program to the next, they're not really going to be all that different on the fundamental level anyway. And even so, it's probably going to be a good 6 months to a year until you notice if it's actually working or not. So when you do it for a few weeks, you're basically going on, I don't know how this is, maybe it's kind of working, and then you just program hop and you don't go anywhere. So have a clear training objective with every single workout. What are you trying to accomplish in this workout? You should be able to answer right away. I'm doing X. I have a goal to improve my pull-ups by 2 reps. I'm trying to get my chest to the bar. Or as we were talking about later, I'm working on keeping my shoulder blades back and retracted while I'm doing my pull-ups, trying to get my back activation a little bit better. You should have a clear training objective every single workout, because then it's very obvious. Well, were you able to get your shoulder blades back and get your back more engaged on that set of pull-ups? Yeah, that felt really good. Good, you're a winner. Workout was effective. Mission accomplished. Now you can practice it a few times and really reinforce it, but that was your objective. You achieve your objective. Workout was effective. There you go. Go home, have a protein shake, right? And you only did the amount of work necessary rather than just chasing after it. So always have a clear training objective for your ability to know that what you're doing is working for you. Okay, so following up with Trizzy saying, I'm in puberty. Does that make it easier? Usually not, actually. So there's puberty and adolescence is kind of a catch-22 with muscle building. Because on one hand, you got hormones going like crazy through your body. You're like saturated in testosterone, potentially. So you got that going for you. But at the same time, your body is spending huge amounts of resources in recovery, turning your body into more of an adult body. So you've got already a ton of changes going on and a lot of stressors and things happening in your body. You've got a lot happening, turning your body into an adult body right now. Building muscle is like way low on the list to some degree. That's why a lot of times people find that they don't really start building any real muscle until their 20s, their early 20s. Because it's like once they've stopped growing, once they've stopped changing around, their voice got deeper and all these other things that come with, then their body's kind of like in this weird stage of it's still in hyper change mode, but it's not doing all those other things so it can apply the resources towards building muscle. Generally, my perspective is that unless you have a good, physique for natural talent, like you're playing football in high school, and like my buddy Tony was like 220 pounds in high school and stuff. Typically, most people don't reach their best muscle building years until their 20s. So adolescence, usually you can do it, absolutely, but it's not usually the way it's done because you're still developing in other areas. Building muscle is usually a secondary thing for the body. And again, this is a very general thing. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who look like they're 45 and jacked and everything by the time they're 15. There's always going to be those guys out there, but they're the exception that kind of proves the rule. I sure as hell didn't really start putting any muscle until I was nearly 30. Partially because, like I said, I was finally learning what I was supposed to be doing and everything, but I was finally also just getting my body to the point where it wasn't going through all those changes. So increasing benefit, have a clear training objective, first and foremost. Number two is not having too many unnecessary exercises. When you have a clear training objective, what that does is it gives you a compass needle on what exercises and methods are going to be the most effective for you. Because most of them are going to be sort of kind of here and there sort of thing. That's why I don't do a lot of the stuff that's popular out there. I don't do calisthenic skills. I don't do burpees. I don't do a lot of body weight stuff. We were talking today at lunch with a couple of friends. They're like, so you do a lot of yoga because you're in a bodyweight trainer? I'm like, no, I don't do any yoga practically because it has nothing to do with my objectives. And whenever we're doing exercise that is out of alignment with your objectives, it's a waste of your time and it's driving up your costs. So you want to focus on the exercises that are most in alignment with your objectives. If you came to me and you're like, I want to build up my biceps, be like, great, pull-ups and bicep curls all day long. Well, couldn't I do it if I did this, CrossFit circuit? Like, yeah, sure. But you're talking about 30 minutes of work and there's 2 exercises that are sort of kind of hitting your biceps. It's a lot of work for not really what you're looking for. But if you just took a heavy barbell and you're like, I'm just going to do 30 curls total and just blast the hell out of my biceps, great, there you go. That's what you care about. Go after that. Make it a direct focus. Don't meddle around with a bunch of other things just because they're popular or they're cool or they're kicking your ass. Again, the hustle culture and everything. It's like, oh, that workout totally kicked my ass. Well, was it in alignment with your objectives, though? I can make you work very hard. But if it's not really in alignment with your objectives, who cares? It doesn't matter. Hard work does not always pay off, my friends. In fact, it very frequently does not, because a lot of it's just a waste. So have very direct training methods for those objectives you're going after. You're going to find it's a hell of a lot more beneficial for what you're after. Okay, so yeah, I'm glossing over this one, but oh, why isn't that popping up? Stay on track is asking. Oop, my computer is not there. So what are the training objectives, if I may ask? Yes, so like I said, I address these a lot. It goes into more depth and detail here, but here they are real quick. Training objective number 1, burning fat and calories. This is the easiest one to do. You do it with literally anything you do is burning more fat and calories. There are 3 ways you can modify that: how much muscle you're using, your intensity, and time. Out of those 3, time is by far the most important. That's why cardio, I know a lot of people are like, cardio, don't run, Joe jog. Bullshit. Cardio is by far the best way to burn a crap ton of fat and calories. By far. Nothing else is going to even come close. People are like, oh, no, it doesn't burn. Go on a 100-mile bike ride with me and tell me that doesn't burn a crap ton of fat and calories. When I was in Vermont, it would be like, I'm going out for a bike ride. Where are you going? Canada. I'm going to ride to Canada and I'm going to be back in 9 hours. You don't think that's going to burn thousands of calories? Absolutely. So time is your most valuable thing when it comes to that training objective. Burning. Objective number 2 is muscular work capacity. That's of two fundamental elements. You have training intensity and you have the time of the intensity. So it's basically strength versus endurance as far as your muscles are concerned. How much tension are you putting in your muscles? How much endurance? Which one of those are you trying to improve, or both? Right? And that's everything. That's if you want to improve muscular endurance, muscular strength, or hypertrophy, which is both of them increasing to some degree. And then you have proficiency, which is basically how well can you use your body. Those are your three training objectives. Which one are you after? You're always going to get all three no matter what you do. So it's not like you have to make a choice. Like, oh, if I work on the proficiency of my free throw in basketball, I'm not going to be burning any calories and I'm not going to be working my muscles. Of course you are. You work all three with anything you do. But when we are training with a purposeful, objective approach, you're putting an emphasis somewhere that you want. So in the case earlier, we were talking about pull-ups, scapular retraction, that's proficiency. That's a proficiency objective. But you could be doing that and saying, okay, I'm working my muscles harder and they're working harder from getting my chest to the bar. That's muscular work capacity for tension, for strength. Oh, I got 3 more reps. That's endurance. And you could be saying, well, yeah, and I burn calories with that. Of course you do. You burn calories with anything. That's why there's no such thing as fat loss exercise, because everything is. It's just a question of the degree. And when we're going after our training objective, that's really what we're looking for, is how much of that objective are you accomplishing? It's not a line in the sand where it's like, oh, I didn't accomplish it at all, versus, yes, I did get it 100%. It's how much did you get it? How much can you accomplish that? I can just run around this apartment complex and achieve the objective of being able to burn fat and calories, but how much did I accomplish that? Took me about 2 minutes, not a whole lot. I didn't achieve it a whole lot, but it was fun. All right, Gatsu, it's good to see you, my friend. Hey, Matt, since August, I focus on hypertrophy with body weight with a side of skills. At the moment, front lever are 90 degrees hold, very good. Next month, I'll be going to lose a bit of fat because of Ramadan. Mini cut, yes, that happens quite a bit. I know lots of folks who have done kind of that as a cutting phase during Ramadan, because of course you're fasting throughout the day until sundown. So planning these things is a very good way to go about it. And you're very smart to be doing it that way, because when life inevitably throws something different into our path, then our motivation is going to change. Absolutely. So you could be like all gung-ho about your workouts, but now you're fasting every single day to some degree for Ramadan. Your energy level may plummet because you're not eating as much. What happens? The perceived cost of your workouts goes up. Maybe you need to make a change in your workouts. And maybe it's not quite as much volume or something like that. Don't be afraid to change things around, my friend, in order to accommodate the level of motivation that you have. Because if you have the best of anything going on, it's not going to stay that way, because life inevitably changes. So, okay, number one, objective-based training. Always should be doing that. Number two, not having unnecessary exercises, making sure you're very direct about exactly what you're trying to accomplish. Redundancy is another big one. I see a lot of training redundancy whenever someone is struggling to get a workout or it's just too long and they've got a ton of redundancy. They've got like 5 different push-up variations, or they've got like 3 different bicep curl exercises. How many different ways do you need to bend your elbow? You're fundamentally doing the same thing 5 different ways. And all that your brain and your subconscious knows is you're doing the same thing 3 different times. Yeah, there is a little bit of a change, but it's not worthwhile, because every additional exercise and set and minute that you're training is an exponentially higher cost, perceived cost. So if you're doing basically the same thing, but the cost keeps getting higher and higher and higher, that's going to destroy motivation. So that's why I'm always telling people, if you're going to train, one, I like to keep my number of exercises pretty low, usually just 1 or 2 per tension chain. And if you're going to do something different, make it really different. Okay, don't just do a different grip on the pull-up bar. Go with like pull-ups, 1 couple of sets, and then have single arm rows, explosively. So now you're changing it as much as you can. You're still working the same muscles. It's still pull chain, but now you're at a different angle. You're going from bilateral to unilateral. You're going from slower movement to faster movement. Change up the rep range, so it's like, okay, we got heavier 5x5 for the pull-ups. Now we're sets of 15 for the rows. How different can you make it? It doesn't have to be radically different every time, but the more different you can make your exercises, the more worthwhile they're going to be for the amount of effort and cost that you're investing into doing the extra exercise. But when you're doing 5 different exercises and there's a slight change and variation to it, that's usually not a good formula for improving your motivation, because you're not really covering that many more bases with those variations. And then finally, take an honest look at the cost of many of these habits too. And in many ways, it pays to think about it like an accountant. How much is that gym membership? Is it going to be cheaper and easier for you to just go work out at the playground? How much time are you spending to get to the gym versus maybe using the gym in your apartment complex? How long is that workout taking you? Is okay, an hour and a half? What if we got it down to 40 minutes? Decrease the costs when and where you can, my friends. Because even if you're spending a lot into it, again, don't assume it's going to be worthwhile, because there's never any guarantee that it's going to pay off and be worthwhile. But if you can make things, quote, easier, that's a good thing. Like, you know what? If I don't, keep my nose on Instagram and the smartphone while I'm working out, I could probably get my workout to be 15 minutes shorter. Great. Good. Do that. And, I've got like all these redundant exercises. I'm sure if I did just these 2 back exercises, that'd probably still be worthwhile, and it'd cut it down by about 50%. Good. Do that. And you know what? I really do want to build up my biceps, but I don't have anything bicep specific in my workout. So I'm going to finish off with a set of curls. Great. So all you're doing with these strategies is bringing down the cost and bringing up the return. And whenever you're doing that, you're definitely going to have more motivation to continue with your habits, because it's not lazy to want to do less work. It's just smart. It's efficient. Human beings survived because of efficiency. If you weren't efficient, then you spent too much effort getting food and building shelter, and you didn't live long enough to produce. So you need to have that efficiency mindset. It's not about minimalism, though, where you're trying to go less, 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 but you want to cut back on unnecessary things. And then when you are looking at having the ability to get more out of your training, that's only going to increase your perceived benefit. And those 2 things are very potent for improving your motivation, because you have to have enough motivation. If you don't, you're just not going to take action. It's that simple. And if you're struggling to take action, you're struggling to have motivation. So we need to make that formula work for you. Don't just force your way through it. Don't listen to, the messages out there that are saying, it doesn't matter if you're not motivated, just do it anyway. That's not going to help you. That's maybe going to get you off the couch after seeing that on Instagram, which I don't know about you, but I've never seen anything on social media that made me immediately go like, wow, that's great. Get up and start doing an exercise. Nope, I just go flick with my thumb, and that thought is now in the distant past. Scroll, 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 and it's like it never happened. So you want to be very conscious of this stuff on a day-to-day basis for yourself. You want to be looking at your cost to benefit ratios at all times. And you do want to be paying attention to your motivation, because when your motivation is going low, that usually says that you're spending too much and that what you're doing probably just isn't worthwhile. It's not going to get you entirely what you want, that you probably are better off doing something else. And you should investigate that. Otherwise, you just keep endlessly driving yourself into the ground and hoping you're going to get what you want through luck, which probably is not going to happen. So also, my friends, don't forget, check out the episode that I just recorded and released a couple days ago with Dan Vincent over here in Colorado of wildgym.com. He's got a brand new rucking backpack coming out on Kickstarter. And I know a lot of you have been asking about rucking, and I didn't have all that much information on it. I kind of gave a couple of opinions, but if you are interested in rucking, and in many ways that can be a very efficient way to get some exercise in and has a relatively low cost to high potential benefit, give that a try. Check out the podcast that I did with Dan Vincent on the RDP channel, or your podcast distribution on Rucking with Dan Vincent, and that can be something to look into as well. But thank you very much for watching / listening, as always, my friends, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you so much for the time flexibility this week because I had to come in a little bit later. But we will do this again next week. I will talk to you then. Till then, be fit and live free.